I always loved music, definitely an audiophile to this day, but it never came naturally to me like visual art does. I'm just not wired to be a professional musician. So when it came time for me to further my education, I made the decision to go to art school at Syracuse University up in New York, where I majored in illustration and minored in sculpture. Upon graduating, I started off as a freelance artist focusing on working with musicians because I wanted to tap back into my love for music and live vicariously through it. Also get into music shows for free because I was very broke at the time. Well, yeah, so basically I was working as a freelance artist, working with musicians, which was always a great time. Not the most timely, but extremely fun people. And this is back when CDs were still a thing, and it was like basically at the peak of dubstep. So I found myself kind of in that world, which was pretty funny. Looking back on it, really dating myself. And I'm going to just show you quickly some of the album art that I did, just to kind of give you an idea of the start of my career. Hopefully the connection gets me there. There we go. I mean, one thing too I love working with musicians is, often they're really giving me freedom to tap into kind of a part of my brain I normally don't. And creative freedom is always fun as an artist. Being able to listen to an album and kind of filter that visually is something I've always really enjoyed. My stuff's very illustrative and pretty out there. Often the word I find is people like to use is trippy. But just kind of in the line of, just tapping into a story. A lot of these pieces kind of tell a story, even though they may seem a little bit, from another world. So this is for a band called Savoy. I feel like at one point, they were huge in the dubstep scene. It was never really my favorite music genre, but it was a lot of fun to be in. They actually headlined at Red Rocks at one point. They were from Colorado. But all these pieces are all their different albums. You can kind of see a similar theme here. And then, just stepping further into electronic music, like Wolfgang Gartner, Trina. I don't know if y'all remember Trina, but she was pretty big back in the day. But yeah, anyways, and it kind of goes into some, darker themes here too. But yeah, that just gives you an idea of the album art that I was doing. And so, when I tapped back into the music scene, I also witnessed the power clothing had to push the culture and the scene of music. This is basically at the kind of precipice of streetwear, and a lot of brands were releasing mixtapes, sponsoring artists. Back when 10 Deep was releasing Kid Cudi's first mixtape, and that was really showing me the power that clothing had to work with music to push a scene. And again, just that theme of community, I felt like I was part of that scene. And that really started to trigger my interest in the power of apparel. So at that point, I decided to pivot and design my own lifestyle label and dedicated myself to learning the ins and outs of the apparel industry. That also involves me printing stuff out of my basement. And just a very kind of common DIY intro to the industry. Runway was my answer to showcasing the creative scene in the Triangle, a scene that I felt wasn't getting enough attention, and I still don't think it does. I think there's so much talent here, and I love to see artists get their shine. I wanted to create a platform for the arts by hosting gallery shows, listening parties for local artists, sponsoring musicians, events, collaborating with like-minded organizations that I felt pushed the culture. And to fund all this, we sold clothing, and by 2016, I had opened our own store and gallery space in downtown Durham, essentially as a creative hub for the arts. Runway was essentially my sole focus for 8 years. And I'll just play a quick video while I continue to talk about this, but this just kind of shows some of the events that we were hosting. We worked a lot with festivals, Hopscotch Music Fest, Moog Fest, worked with the Durham Bulls to create collaborative jerseys at the team war. We had like Sylvaness up throughout the first pitch. We worked a lot with Gian Ozawa, who's a wonderful Japanese-American rapper from Durham. Worked with Carolina Hurricanes. Basically any organization locally that we felt really resonated with the mission we were trying to push. This is actually in the space here. This is a store that used to be right next to 21C. We shuttered it right before the pandemic, which was pretty lucky on my end, but considering the troubles retail had during that time. But yeah, it was just a very special time in Durham's history. I felt like we were really trying to showcase the scene, and I think it introduced a lot of people to artists that they still know today. But by 2019, I felt like it was a time for a new adventure, which was public art. I've always loved sculpture, always loved painting, and the idea of artwork in a space with no boundaries really resonated with me. Galleries are contained spaces and can often feel intimidating or even classist, with the higher end levels of galleries, and in the streets there are obviously no barriers. Anybody can walk up, anyone has access, and that really appealed to me. Especially going to larger cities with a very, intense mural scene, specifically cities like Detroit and Philly, like you just go around and there's a mural on every corner. So that kind of became my new interest and mission. And once diving into public art, I quickly learned there's a component way more important than the physical artwork itself, and that is community engagement. Public art should represent a people and a place, hence the name public. It's not about me, it's not about the people hosting the mural, it's about the place and the people. Using methods I learned from my mother, actually, as a public health professional, professor at UNC for 40 years, she taught me the importance of receiving authentic feedback from groups that often aren't allowed a voice or a seat at the table. Something she often wasn't given as an Asian American woman. So using methods like advisory boards, digital feedback campaigns, candid in-person engagement sessions at public events, they all help to provide an idea of what an inclusive piece of representative artwork means to a specific area. And tapping into historically marginalized communities is my primary focus on these projects, and often proves difficult as relations between these communities and organizations, they're navigating generations of mistrust. So, obviously we're trying to change that, but it is very real. I'm just going to show you some of these projects I'm talking about. And most of these projects are murals. I am starting to move towards public art sculpture as well, which I'm extremely excited about. I feel like the piece here in the library, yes, it's on a wall, but it's a little bit 3D in the sense, we couldn't actually work on a staircase because the gap in between the staircase and the wall is pretty dangerous. So we tried to avoid that, even though the install was pretty sketchy too. There's some here now. So this piece here is in downtown Durham at the downtown bus station at an affordable housing complex in downtown Durham. Something I'm extremely passionate about is affordable housing. And so this project was a dream for me. And when engaging the public about this piece, I really wanted to highlight for people to think about, the land and its history, which is in downtown Durham, what took place here. It went all the way back to the beginnings of it as indigenous land. These areas were inhabited primarily by the Eno Indians, hence the Eno River is named after them. So I actually worked with the Okinichi Band of the Saponi Nation to get their guidance and blessing to work with them and the imagery and the patterning of this piece. There's a lot of symbols here. This is an ancient symbol for the tribe, which is the red-tailed hawk as it spread its wings here. Even the colors are dialed into a lot of the aesthetics that they know as a tribe. So I was working with the tribal council on this. And this really felt, to me, I think this piece is extremely important to me because you look at a city like Durham, there's no public art acknowledging that part of the area's history. So to be able to recognize them and give them a voice here was pretty powerful for me, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity. This piece here too, this is in Morganton, North Carolina, on the way to Asheville. I don't know if you've ever stopped in Morganton, but it's a great little mountain town right off 40. And you think about certain areas of North Carolina, you don't expect people to be there. This place is an extremely diverse town. You have a large Hmong population, which are immigrants from the Laotian mountains of Laos and Vietnam, and they came during the Vietnam War, and they were placed in California, Minnesota, places that are totally alien to them. And the North Carolina mountains actually spoke to them because it's kind of similar to their hometown, or the mountains they lived in Southeast Asia. There's also a huge Guatemalan population, a lot of Hispanic populations in this town that were originally brought by the textile industry, and now those jobs have more shifted to poultry. But in this piece, I really wanted to speak and work with the Hmong and the Hispanic populations that lived there, and the thing that really binded them all together was textiles. So you see so much of these Central American style textiles here. You have these narrative cloth works that the Hmong are famous for, and then you have these hands weaving everything together. It actually creates the mountains of the area too, which are the foothills of Morganton. And then in the background you have your traditional Appalachian barn quilting, which many people know that for. So we want to represent every type of person here, but through the eyes of textiles. You also have Lake James sitting back here. So really spending weeks talking to folks, putting together an advisory board, making sure those members on the advisory board have access to these communities that I normally wouldn't have access to, and giving me the opportunity to speak with them both in person and digitally was tremendous in informing the artwork for this piece. And this is actually on the Morganton, or the Burke Arts Council in downtown Morganton. And then I'll show you a couple more here. These are some projects in Raleigh. This is actually on Morgan and West Street in downtown Raleigh. This is for Dick's Park. And I'll just find another piece here. This one was at North Hills Mall for a while, in the Bank of America building. This piece was really speaking to the Asian community that is the fastest growing demographic in the Triangle right now. Obviously something I resonate with, but being able to tell that story of Asian immigrants coming to this area was very cathartic and powerful for me personally, and to also place it in an area like North Hills that is so affluent and demographically white. I felt like it's important to tell these type of stories and show to be able to speak for voices that normally aren't shown there. So I hope some people caught this while it was up for a year. I know they just showcased a new artist from Western North Carolina who's super talented. I'm excited to see. And I'll show you this last one too. This is a project I just finished for the city of Asheville, or actually Buncombe County, which is where Asheville is. And this is for a equity mural project where they hired 3 artists to paint 3 separate murals this year. One celebrating Latinx pride. Another is an indigenous artist painting traditional Cherokee lettering on one of their downtown buildings. And this is actually on the Register of Deeds on College Street, right across from the courthouse. And with this piece, Buncombe County is 90% white, so it's like, how do I find people to talk to equity about truly? And luckily I was able to be there during Juneteenth activities that were, a lot of educational opportunities across the city. And I was able to talk to a lot of people, and essentially the story that was, or the theme that really rose to the top was housing and the disparities there. It's a common story across the country, but specifically in Asheville, urban renewal and redlining really destroyed a lot of the traditionally black neighborhoods there that were, essentially there for generations. Now those neighborhoods are almost completely erased, but you can still talk to a few folks who still live there, and you can still tell the story. And I was lucky enough to learn about those stories. So you have a lot of these different neighborhoods, celebrated in these banners. You have Southside, Hillcrest, Burton Street, Stumptown, East End, Chestnut Hill, Shiloh. Some of these neighborhoods don't exist at all anymore. But the idea here was, a pair of mating red-winged blackbirds. The male is very colorful here. You have the female there. I really want to represent family. Obviously, they're building a nest here. There's a lot of symbolic elements too that speak on, the history of Asheville. I also wanted to have these hands to kind of give a first-person view as a sort of call to action that we should try and at least preserve and rebuild these neighborhoods before it's too late. Even the kudzu growing within the piece here has meaning as a plant that is often villainized as a weed, but it's flourishing here, which I think is a common story many immigrants feel when they come to this country. So this piece, I was really grateful to be embraced in the community, and speak on a situation that, I think a lot of people talk about in Nashville, but it's not seeing a lot of action. And I'll just show you one more. This piece right here is actually a bus in Chapel Hill. If you're ever in Chapel Hill, look out for this bus. It just got put up. It's going to run for 2 years. But again, it's celebrating Asian communities in Chapel Hill. The tagline I came up with this is from Asia to Chapel Hill with love. So you actually have these Cantonese characters that say that, and on the back it says in English. But had a lot of fun with that one. And so tying all this into the project here at Wake Tech, I implemented a lot of similar strategies. Community engagement, again, was, I felt like, the most important part of this project. And this piece really is about y'all. It has nothing to do with me. I really wanted to talk to not only students, but also, faculty, staff, community patrons. It's really the public place. I think it falls under public art. So I wanted to implement those techniques as well. And talking to y'all, I'm sure, I hope I talked to a few of you in the room. I talked to so many people, it's hard to see all the faces, but we did digital feedback and in person, and the themes of diversity, nature, history, education were the top requests in that order. So diversity and nature were at the top. And this feedback was achieved, over the course of several weeks. And so obviously, I want to give the people what they want. So this piece spoke to diversity and nature as it relates to Wake Tech, in the land that Scott Northern Wake Campus Library resides on. And so I hope you've taken a second to look at the piece. If not, please take a look at it after. But the natural forms, which are inspired by nature, are aesthetically influenced from traditional patterns from around the world. I was blown away by the demographics, not only reading through them when they were provided to me by the staff here, but also just seeing all the different faces, talking to people, hearing the accents. It was a beautiful thing. So you have patterns from West Africa, the indigenous Americas, Eastern Europe, Middle East, South Asian. I really wanted to pull in as many different parts of the world as I could, but then also implement my own style on it, which is definitely heavily influenced by Eastern art, which is Eastern Asian art, which is part of my Chinese ancestry. All these different clouds that have these patterns in them. I pulled all those colors to then create the eagle. All the feathers are colored by these clouds, and the eagle essentially represents, to me at least, an amalgamation of inclusive success, which I think is definitely part of Wake Tech's goal. And to me, the more diverse voices you have at the table, the better the result is going to be, and I see a lot of that here. So really impressed by that. And kind of to wrap it up, public art has allowed me to connect with thousands of people that I normally would never have a connection to in my daily life. Will I be creating public art in 10 years? Looking at my track record, probably not, but I hope so. And, I am sure of one thing though, and that that constant is going to be community, and whatever shape or form that is. Extremely excited for that. And I'll open up for questions.
Have people ever graffiti on your work, or do they go
there's a lack of it, but I'm 100%. I think graffiti is art. I love graffiti. Actually, my first mural was on the train. So I can definitely relate to graffiti artists. They're very respectful generally. If there is a mural, I've seen it happen, but it's very rare. There's so many walls left here that aren't touched. I think there's not a problem with that. But what I do often do for murals that are in a very public place, you can put a coating on it that's essentially a sacrificial coat. And if it does get graffitied on, you can actually buff that coating off and maintain that layer and put that clear layer back up. So there are ways to try and avoid that. But yeah. Great question.
I was just curious, I love how creative your work is, and I just wanted to know, how did you develop your line work? And like a lot of your murals that we seem to be a mix of like a lot of organic shapes and then geometric shapes. So I was just curious, how did you think of that, or like what helped you, what inspired you to develop a style like that?
I've always, outside of art, I think just being out in nature is my favorite thing. I love to fish, especially fly fishing. So, I think just being in a natural element, you just see these organic shapes. My work is definitely more organic than geometric. I have incorporated into certain projects, like the Morganton project with the geometric quilts and things. To tell you the truth, painting a straight line on a wall is much bigger pain in the ass than doing a nice curvy line that has a little bit of wiggle room. So I definitely enjoy that part of it too. But yeah, even if you look back at my early work, which was much more, I'd say, detailed, which was which is easier to do when you're painting or drawing on a piece of paper as opposed to a giant wall. I think just over the years that style has just kind of carried over. And I think too, like, just speaking back on doing the same thing over and over again to achieve success, I think ideally too, as long as you have some factor that ties it all in, like some line style or a theme that kind of pulls it all together, I think you can really get funky and experiment a bit. So, hope that answers your question.
How long does it normally take you to create and finish a mural?
It all depends, but man, there's so many factors that go into a mural that I try and get them done as quickly as possible now. Especially when you're using a lift. Like I just had to do a road closure on Atlantic Avenue over by Raleigh Ironworks, which is a new development in downtown Raleigh. Again, just dealing with city road closures, renting an 80-foot boom lift, that money adds up quick. You even got to rent, cones and traffic signs, which is expensive. So keeping on track with budget's definitely an influence. I think as well, weather, you never know what's going to happen if an outdoor mural is going on. The nice thing about this piece is it was all done, in an indoor studio, and then it was actually being installed in one day. We didn't have to block up the staircase here or anything. Indoor ones obviously have a little more wiggle room, but I'll say, like, for a project like this project, you kind of get an idea of the window scale here. That one took 6 days. This mural, man, this one kicked my butt. This is with the Carolina Hurricanes. We painted this, last summer. You can see me here for scale, right there. But this is right across from the convention center. This piece, the Canes were really trying to get it done during the playoffs. So they were really pushing to get it done quickly. I finished this one in 6 days, and the day I finished it, they got knocked out of the playoffs. So it's kind of a bummer, but yeah, you can see all these little numbers here. So it's actually inspired by a synoptic weather chart, which tracks wind speed, pressure, and so all these lines are actually like an actual hurricane chart. And then they often have like little numbers here that indicate wind speed. All these little numbers are actually all the years they made it to the playoffs. And there's one that's in red here. You can't see it on this image. You can see it here, but that's actually really won the Stanley Cup. So, just trying to tie more meaning into it. This is actually with the city of Raleigh too. Went through a few iterations of the design because obviously it can't just look like a giant billboard. It has to be within public art, at least the the standards of the city. So we, making it more organic, again, the organic lines.
Oakley.
Yeah, wraps the building here. Tying it in a little bit more into city is how we achieved this to be public art as opposed to just a big advertisement. So yeah, it all depends, but I feel like I've really gotten my speed up because you just want to get it done as quickly as possible if something goes wrong.
I have a technical question. So when you're working on such a large scale, is it literally just a matter of taking a small drawing and blowing it up, or are there other factors you have to consider for the finished product?
So one factor you really got to consider is wall material. This was the worst raw material I've ever painted on. It's 100 times worse than brick because it's this block that essentially is completely textured. Some's concave, some convex. Just a nightmare to paint on. But we still got it done. We had to do spray paint for this, so that will often dictate the material that you're using. Speaking of blowing your image up from small to big, there's a lot of different techniques, but the one that's really kind of become ubiquitous with mural painting is called the doodle technique. I don't know if you've ever seen this done. If you've seen artists look like they're just doodling on a wall, doing little scribbles and stuff, that's to help them map out the piece. So I'll often be doing that method where it's a primed wall. I'm doing my little spray paint doodles, and I've actually had the police calling me because they thought I was just vandalizing the building because it does look really bad, just like little scribbles. But then, you essentially take a centered photo of all your scribbles, and then in Photoshop, you overlay your drawing on top of that photo. And then say I scribbled a little $sign here at the top of the helmet before I actually painted anything on there. I can then look at my phone, which has that digital image, and I can say, oh, that little scribble, that's that point, if that makes sense. It's a lot more efficient than actually gridding it all out and measuring everything. I hope to be good enough one day where I can just get up there and paint it. I'm definitely finding more success with that, but when you're painting this big, it's pretty tough to get all your spatial ratios in line. But I do think there's a little bit of innate brain chemistry that allows you to kind of picture things on a bigger scale like that. But I think that's definitely the hardest part. What kind of art do you like to do?
Mostly illustration, graphite, photography, sculpture. I'm kind of like all over the place.
Man, I would just say go for it. My last 9 to 5 was when I was 26, and that was I did that for 2 years. It was at a screen printing company. That's where I learned how to screen print clothing. And I just took a risk, and I think the most important part is back to community, is really tapping into that community. That's going to open doors for you. And also, when creating like a brand or a project, finding those people who, can bring something to the table. So, if say you're, creating a music video and you're creating a set or something, finding those musicians that really, are like-minded and work well with you, and kind of just creating something together, and then you can all put your names on it. I think that's really important. Just basically working together. And yeah, just, I think it's important too, like you can switch up your style a bit, but I think just staying true to what themes really matter to you within art, I think can really help. So yeah, I think that's the main thing.
What are some artists that inspired you for how you prepare your style?
I'd say comic books honestly were a huge influence on me growing up. A lot of like 90s comic book stuff when I was a kid, I think influences some of my style. Some of my heroes are still, like Frank Miller, Jim Lee, those type of people. I think now, like James Jean he blows my mind every time he does something. I think you can definitely see some of the influence in my art, especially with, pieces like this. Kind of just call this the acid swamp, but it's this is an American Underground in a space in downtown Durham. But and I realized too, a lot of these artists that I look up to are Asian American, so I think just like taking kind of their background and their ancestry and putting that towards their art, I think is definitely inspiring to me. But yeah, even local artists like Taylor White, I think is a phenomenal muralist in the area. I think she's the best. we're hoping to collaborate on a mural soon. And then obviously music too. I think I take a lot of influence from music. So just kind of, staying current on those local artists and bigger artists, I think is very important.
Can you talk a little bit more about like youth mentorship and like what impact that has on your process?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, actually for that Asheville mural I was just talking about, we brought on 2 high school aged apprentices, or actually 3 for the community engagement part of the project. I thought that was really important too because I'm not from Asheville. And when applying to the project, they wanted actually, there's an RFQ, which is request for qualifications, where you can just kind of apply and give work samples. And then there's what's called an RFP, which is request for proposals. And a lot of cities will put these out. They wanted an actual proposal with the design. And when I went to them, I said, look, I'm not from Buncombe County. The only way I feel comfortable doing this is if I engage the community and actually work with some people from here. So, I worked with this group called Arteria Collective, which is primarily for black and brown kids to have, after-school mentoring and programming for social change, mostly focused around the arts. And so working with them, it's always so fun working with kids too. They just bring so much energy to the project. And again, they were able to tap into their communities like I wouldn't have been able to, especially the youth. And I always want to bring in, ideas from not only, older folks, but younger folks too. We even tapped into elementary schools for some of these community engagement campaigns. For the one in Morganton, I think, we often do a survey so you can track all the results. And, Minions was like in the top 5. But that was just because we tapped into the schools. Now will we paint Minions? No. But, it's always fun to see what comes up. But yeah, and then too, like, I always think it's important to pay them a living wage as well. These kids in Buncombe County, we were paying $25 an hour. These are 15-year-olds. If I made $25 an hour when I was that age, it would have blown my mind. In Durham, we didn't have these opportunities as kids, to work with artists like that. So I think it's extremely important. In Durham, I work with a couple of organizations like Student U and the Nasher, which is Duke's Art Museum. They have a team program. We've been, sourcing high school age kids to assist me on murals for various projects. And, it's mostly, filling color, almost like paint by number. But just to give them that experience and show them that, you can make good money doing art. You just have to dedicate yourself and always make sure to pay them too. I don't believe in people not getting paid.
Our mural here, what kind of challenges did you run into because of the L shape?
Oh, of the staircase?
Yes.
Oh man. Yeah. Well, originally, y'all hit me up about doing a proper mural on the wall, but there's that stair gap of death there, so I wasn't too keen on that. And then it's also on a staircase, which is tricky. So I pitched y'all one saying, okay, well let me do some wood cut. It's made out of birch. It's all cut with a jigsaw, and then painted in pieces, and it's all French cleated up there. So that was a little challenging, just in imagining the space or having my elevations and going off that offsite. That's always challenging because you're not right there. But then also the installation itself, I'd never done an installation on a staircase like that. So that was a little tricky. We did it with a staircase ladder, but this ladder didn't quite fit right. So thank God I had an awesome team here of several faculty members who were able to basically keep me from getting killed up there. I always keep a certificate of insurance for all jobs in case something does go bad. But yeah, the install was by far the hardest part of this.
It worked out fine.
Yeah, no, it all worked out.
No one died.
And what I love about this job too, and I think what keeps it so interesting to me is, again, there's every job I learn something new. Like I said before, there's not a ton of rules, so you're always kind of just trying to see what you can break and see what you can do. Breaking rules, not bones. But yeah, so. But I think it all worked out. I think it looks pretty cool up there.
What did you learn from this job?
I think mostly I learned from the installation that, I think in the future, if I did another job like this, I would get an actual scaffold that is specific for a staircase, as opposed to using a ladder with adjustable feet, which is what we did, just for a safer work platform. A lot of these jobs I'm used to working on a giant boom lift, which, honestly at this point I feel pretty safe on those things. You're all strapped in. And still kind of terrifying at some points, but yeah. So.
Well, are there any other questions? No.
Sorry, I just have one more. Is there any artist specifically or any kind of art that has inspired you to use color the way you do in your mural work?
To be honest, no. Yeah, I kind of just, some jobs will dictate the palette. Like if it's for, say, a developer and the interior designer has a color palette laid out already. I kind of just go with colors I think look good. Generally, you want to tone down your colors on the interior a bit. We didn't really do that here, but it's I feel like since it's a bit spread out and there are some splashes of color in here, it worked out. But outdoor, people always want bright colors. I mean, it's interesting now. Murals are more popular than ever because I think people see the marketing potential in them. They say, "Oh, like I want people to," like you said, it can be distracting at times. But you want to draw people's eyes in and have them interact with it. The term I get most now is Instagrammable, which is kind of terrible. But a lot of people ask for the Nashville wings. You know about the Nashville wings? It's like a bachelorette mecca at this point in Nashville, pilgrimage of sorts. But anyways, that's fine for that's its own lane. There's actually the artist did some wings at North Hills Mall, close to where my dragon installation was. But I think there's different types of murals for everybody. I get calls all the time for people just wanting logos and I have a Rolodex of sign painters I refer them to. But yeah, color-wise, I think, I don't know, I just kind of go whatever colors look good together, and I hope the client likes it. So we went through a couple color iterations for this piece, actually. I think we had to tone it down a notch, but it still came out right.
What is the dragon now? Because I like it very much.
So the North Hills, or it's Kane Realty, they actually own the artwork now. So I'll be interested to see where they put it. I hope.
Where did they put it? I haven't seen it.
I'm sure it's just in a storage facility right now. I hope they put it up somewhere in one of their many, many developments. I would like for it to see the light of day again.
So you said that you kind of map out your sketches and stuff in like Photoshop. Do you map out your colors in the same like Photoshop file at the same time so you can figure out what you're going to use?
Yeah, so I mean, what I'm mostly using now is Procreate to actually do my design sketches, and then you can export it as a PSD, a JPEG, whatever, PDF, and so I'll have a color comp as well as just an outline or composition. I wish I had some examples of that on my website, but I don't. But yeah, there's tons of YouTube videos and other resources where you can actually see people using that method to actually, and then too, like I think the easiest way to get into a mural if you're doing it indoors is use a projector. A lot of artists do that too. If you project your outline on a wall, you can just trace it out. But that method doesn't really work for larger exterior murals. Some people still do it exterior. But,
yeah, this is more of a comment. I love hearing about your process of engaging the community first and hearing what people have to say, and it's great. It's very inspiring to hear you talk about sort of the works. I'm sitting here thinking about the mural is kind of the last thing, right? But it sort of seems like a whole, like almost performance art. Like the whole thing is like you got community. It takes God knows how long to pull all this together, to secure the funds, to bring, and seeing those sort of pure expressions of community, and honestly just a lot of love that I see coming out of what you're expressing, and it's just great. It's great. So it's inspiring, and I'm wondering, like, how long you talked about the actually painting and the creating, but like from initial, hey, there's just opportunity, right? And then the board, and then the groups, and like, do you get frustrated with that? Does it take too long? Or is it like, I'm doing this quick, we're moving along? Can you talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question. I tell people more of the work that I'm doing is away from the wall.
Yeah.
So, it's probably less than half, especially when I'm knocking some of these out in like less than a week. There's budgeting, there's contracts, there's, especially if it's for a municipality, there's so many chefs in the kitchen that it needs to go by. You got lawyers, all this crazy stuff. A lot of these towns, they have, downtown corridors where it's very strict on what kind of public art you can put up, which makes sense. I mean, again, it's for the public, and they need to do their due diligence. So that, a lot of people get in trouble for that type of stuff. I think with the community engagement part, though, that can go as long as you want it to. Oftentimes, I give it a month for people to really have time to respond to our digital feedback and make sure there's enough events that I can actually attend to talk to people. Also, if I set up an event where I'm just setting up a table and being like, hey, we're inviting people to come out and talk about a mural, nobody shows up. So I need to come to a festival or a city meeting that's already going down, and I just show up with a notebook and I find just straight up candid conversations where I just approach people is the best way. You got to kind of corner them. But most people are great about talking about it. It's rare that I find people not willing to give their 2 cents. But yeah, most of the work is done, and I appreciate you recognize that, because I think so many people might look at my Instagram and say, oh man, that's all he does is stare at walls all day and paint walls, and that's not the case. There's a lot of the stuff is painted by too.
Sure.
So maybe one day I'll get a manager to handle some of the budgets and contracts and things, but at least right now I'm doing it all. And I think too, just speaking on the question earlier, just about wanting to be a professional artist, if you want to make it a source of income and make it your full-time thing, it's unfortunate a lot of schools don't teach the business end of art. That's something I had to learn the hard way. I feel like through Runaway, the clothing company, I basically got a business degree just through trial and error and just learning how all that stuff works. Budgeting, wholesale, retail, all that stuff. So yeah, I think it's really important to learn the money part of it, because a lot of people are trying to take advantage of artists too. Don't work for free.
People, a lot of times will get different messages from the same artwork, which I guess is the beauty of art, makes it different than a logo. So a lot of students will see your art, but is there any particular message as they come in here to study that you hope some of them take from your art, that particular work?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, like you said, the beauty of art is it is subjective. But after speaking to the students, it seems like people come here as a refuge. It's very calming. It's in the woods, got all this nature going around. It's quiet, except for now because I'm speaking. But it's like, yeah, I think I just wanted to create a kind of a calming space. Obviously, y'all's mascot is an eagle, so maybe that was a little over the head. But
No, we love it.
but yeah, I think I just hope that people take the time to actually look at the details and think about it. I hope they might see a part of their culture in the piece. These are part of the reason I chose patterns is because those are some of the most ancient symbols in the world. You see patterning all the way back to Egyptians or the cradle of life. So it's taking some of those recognizable patterns and putting them there. I feel like just ties back to just the beginnings of society till now. So, but yeah, the main thing is I just wanted people to be seen or feel seen. And I think in a lot of my work, that's my main goal. Is just interesting enough, cities like Morganton or I did one in Columbia, North Carolina, which is on the way to Outer Banks. A lot of the projects I do, you'll see Confederate monuments in these towns. These are smaller towns, and I think some people might deem that as artwork. I kind of see it as something else, but a lot of these projects too, I'm kind of trying to be the antithesis of that. I'm trying to say, okay, well, let's represent some people who have, never actually had artwork dedicated to them, or at least telling their story. So, I think that's part of it too. I think it's important for people to feel heard and seen. So.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk and for allowing us to get to know your work a little bit better. So I'd like at this point to invite you all to certainly admire the beautiful paintings from the Up Close exhibit. We also have some refreshments under the stairs, and definitely, of course, check out the mural, right, Ascension, and mill about and chat, and hopefully you'll still be around to chat with people. Thank you so much.
And you have to do it for the next 50 years. You can't change your mind.
Next month, the beauty of it all is you can just kind of
But it's a lot like this. There's a lot of open space, a lot of white walls, a lot of wood.
you should tell parents.
You like more stairs.
Oh yeah, thank you.